everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Noor Shanina. I'm the CEO of Ubuntu Project, who will be administrating the African Australian Creative Media grants for 2024 on behalf of the Scanlon Foundation. And I'll speak about both of those a bit more in a second. But thank you all for joining us. First and foremost, as always, I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay respects to their elders, past and present. I also know there's quite a few joining us from across all of Australia, so I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of any lands that you may all be joining us from or living in or working, and also pay respects to their elders, past and present. And to acknowledge, as always should, land was never seceded, always was, always will be First Nation land, and no treaty was ever signed. So having said that, I can go straight into my slideshow. Give me a second. There we go. I think you should be able to see this slideshow now. As I said, African Creative Media Grants information session for 2024. Thank you all for joining us. And we're gonna have a little glitch. There we go. This is what we're going to be doing today. Obviously, talk about the grant. Some of you may already be familiar with the grant, as this is the third year it's being delivered. And some of you may be brand new to it, haven't heard of it before, or maybe not applied before. So we're going to we've allocated an hour going over all of the information. Probably will not take an hour, but we will take as many questions along the way and take our time and go through them. Now, speaking of questions, you can, whether you're on your phone, your laptop, your desktop, you can click on the Q&A icon, Q&A option, and you can send in your questions. We do have a moderator that will be answering some of those questions if they're sort of not relevant to everybody. Maybe it's you have a specific unique question. But I will try, as I go through each one of those sections, to answer relevant questions as they come up. If we do miss anything, I will come back and will skim over all of the questions again. And lastly, you can follow up with questions after today's session, or if there's any questions that we missed today, we will just directly get back to you if we can. All right, so we're going to go over sort of the different parts of the grant and the application process. We're going to talk about what Ubuntu Project is, the purpose of the grant, how to apply, who is eligible, which is a really important question, and some key sections like key criteria and budget. And then we'll talk about some of the features or dot points of what a successful application and by extension, a successful project looks like. And we'll also speak about our selection process. And I'll do a very quick overview or introduction, I should say, of our selection panelist. And then, as I said, we'll leave question time, extra time at the end if we do need them. Now, as you send in your questions, do feel free to do it as I'm going through. As I said, someone is moderating, and I'll also have some of the questions up, so I'll be going over them as we go. All right, so I said I was the CEO of Ubuntu Project, and I thought I'll give you a quick introduction into who we are. We're an African Australian community-led organization based in Victoria, but really hoping to be doing a lot more interstate and creating more networks across the different African Australian communities across all of Australia. Our mission is to create an environment for the improvement of policies and services to promote community empowerment and strong leadership to realize the potential of African Australian, probably should say African Australian communities. We do that in a number of ways. There's what I like to call the three-pronged approach. We do that by trying to improve the design and delivery of policies, services, programs. We do that by working with government, philanthropic organizations, private corporations, but also within the community with community services and other organizations. The second sort of front to that work is engaging community members through culture, creativity, and events to support their growth and development of their skills and abilities to succeed. Sometimes that's done at an individual level, sometimes that's a collective approach, which kind of explains why we're involved with this amazing grant. And the third, but not least, front to that sort of strategy is to expand the collection of research and data on our communities. And we do all of those things in a couple of different ways. One example is the research we did, a report some of you may have come across, called Racism in Schools, African Australian Students Speak Up. And that was a Victorian-focused research that we did into racism experienced by African Australian high school students, but we focused on that coming from teachers and staff, which is something that's sort of under-researched. And we do have a little bit more research coming out, hopefully this year. Another example of some of the ways we try to achieve our 3 strategies is through some annual events that we're involved in, like the African Australian Career Expo, which is actually happening on the 11th of May this year. So if you're down in Victoria or Melbourne, do feel free to pop in. And we also have the African Cultural Expo, which we started last year, but we're working really hard to make that an annual event. And the focus there is to have all of the different African cultures and traditions and clothing and food and everything else you can think of kind of being displayed and showcased and shared as a way for our young people to kind of grow up knowing that themselves and being very confident, but also growing up to see that being celebrated publicly. And we do also support a number of community-led initiatives. Most of the work we're able to do is only because of our partners and our networks. That's a very brief sort of overview of what we do. And I want to talk about sort of this grant. As some of you may be aware, if you're not, then this grant is actually funded by the Scanlon Foundation, which is a foundation, a philanthropic family, privately owned philanthropic organization based in Victoria, but they work throughout all of Australia. And as I said earlier, this is the 3rd year of the grant. So this is a grant that the foundation began after having conducted a number of roundtable discussions with African creatives and artists, kind of trying to figure out where some more support could be focused and how they can positively contribute to that sector. And that led to the African Australian Creative Media Grant. So I just want to acknowledge them. And they have invited Ubuntu Project this year and myself to administer the grant, because the foundation thought that it was very important that a grant like this be community-owned, community-led, or at least through a community-led organization, which I full-heartedly agree with. So I just want to acknowledge the foundation for that. All right, the grant. Here's a little bit of an overview, which will sort of set the scene when we start talking about eligibility criteria and sort of what the focus and purpose of the grant is. The African Australian Creative Media Support Program. It's an open grant, meaning it's not an exclusive club. You don't have to be personally invited to apply. Anyone can apply. And obviously they need to meet the eligibility criteria that we'll get into in a little bit. And it's focused on African Australian creatives and platforms. It's an open grant, as I said, for individuals, organizations, small organizations, large organizations that operate in visual media, podcasting, radio, and written media. Now, I do want to say those are examples, but obviously don't limit your creativity. Creativity or creative is in the title. And the way that grant is going to hopefully achieve some of those goals is through 2 streams. So stream 1 is platform development, and I'll get into a bit more of a breakdown of what each stream is and what it means further along on the slides. But as I said, stream 1 is platform development. Stream 2 is content creation. And the program is looking to fund a total of 10 successful applicants. So that's 5 for platform development and 5 for content creation. Now, the first 2 years, the grant did have a 3rd stream, which was events. That is actually not included this year. That is on hold. We will be looking at bringing it back in the future, hopefully. But for this year, events are not a part of the African Australian Creative Media Grants. So that's a really brief overview. As I said, I will get into a little bit more what the streams are and eligibility criteria and sort of a few other things. So the purpose of the grant, as you can see on there, there's 3 purposes, 3 goals, I guess you could say, that the grant is trying to achieve. Their community voices, platform sustainability, and sector development. Now, what do they actually mean? Community voices is about, 1, how do we amplify African Australian voices? Again, whether they're individuals or organizations, and how do we support their expressive, creative, artistic endeavors as a way of, I guess, adding to a narrative of what Australia is and who makes up Australia and who is here. But it's also about showcasing the diversity of experiences that exist within the African Australian community. As you all would be really well aware, not all Africans are the same, as they say, but also, this is a grant that's open across all of Australia. We as an organization are based in Victoria. This is a national grant for all states and territories. And we really want to sort of see a diverse stories and expressions and narratives and, creative expression, really. So community voices is really important. It's about how do we amplify those voices? How do we increase their reach? How do we increase their storytelling? But also within the African Australian community and the diverse communities that we have, how do we amplify a wide range of experiences and other views? The second purpose for the grant is platform sustainability. Platforms are really important, and that could be print, it could be social media, it could be, the term platform is really flexible. So how do we make them more sustainable, but also how do we cultivate more of them, right? Because that is the new media, that is the new, I don't think they call it alternative media anymore. But platform sustainability means to increase overall reach and depth of engagement. So we're looking for platforms that exist. They might not be very large. They might not have a very big following or subscription or whatever field they might be in. But how do we increase that? Not only the numbers overall, but depth of engagement. So that's a goal that we want to achieve through this grant. And the second part of the platform sustainability is financial growth and sustainability of African media platforms. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but what it means is sometimes it's about how do we get more resources, whether it's for equipment, if it's marketing, if it's for promotion, graphic designers, how do we generate partnerships, collaborations, and make sure that these platforms are sustainable and will be around, I should say, doing the amazing work that they do, whether it's for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and hopefully continuously grow through that process. And the third purpose of this grant is sector development. We want greater diversity and representation in Australian media, and media and what is media is changing. And so looking down the track of going forward into the future, we want to see a lot more diversity in that, and we want to see a lot more African Australian voices and narratives and perspectives represented in what makes up the media in Australia. And we are looking for a mix of both emerging and established African Australian individuals, small and medium organizations. Now, what does that mean? I'll talk a little bit more about applying as an individual, but we're not only looking for well-established community-led organizations that are, doing things at a very high level. Absolutely, we're looking for that, but we're also looking for, it might be something relatively new, something really small. It might be an individual that's done some things in the past that, of course, will help your submission. But we're looking to basically, what we're trying to say is we're trying to sort of invest across the entire African Australian landscape and the creatives. So you don't have to be someone who's been doing it for 10 years. If you are, absolutely, you can apply. We're looking for those kind of submissions as well. But also if you're really just getting started. So that's the overall purpose of the grant. And this section is really important to understand because, like I said earlier, it will illuminate or explain when we get into selection criteria and other things. Now, I did hint at talking about who can apply for the grant. So first and foremost, whether you're an individual, you're an organization, small, large, whatever you might be, you must have an ABN. It has to be a current and active ABN. So whoever is putting in the submission, an ABN is a prerequisite. If it's not included, if it's not active, that might hinder your application in the from going into the actual selection process and assessment process. Sorry. Now we will accept and we're looking for applications from African Australian individuals in any creative media industry. And I did give a few examples of what we mean by creative media industry. It could be film, it could be TV, it could be magazine, radio, podcast, it could be online content, any other form of media. So don't allow us to limit you. We do want to have a breadth. We do want to have a wide range of not just applicants and, whether the individuals and organizations, but also creative formats represented in our applications. We're also looking for applications for media platforms led by African Australian community. And that could include, like I said, magazines, blogs, and other examples. But they need to be led by African Australian communities or African Australian individuals, if it's not an organization. What we're not looking for is a young person applying, but a large organization applying on their behalf. So it shouldn't be, larger organizations submitting applications on behalf of individuals or smaller groups. We would actually prefer if you directly apply, like I said, as long as you have a current ABN. And also we're looking for Africans in Australia, regardless of their backgrounds. What I mean by that is you might be an African Australian, but if you're in Africa or you're in Europe or you're somewhere else or even New Zealand, you do need to be in Australia when you apply, or at least when you're delivering your activity, it needs to be Australian based. That's the part of the purpose of this grant. And we do explicitly say, because we do get questions about this, your visa status, your nationality background, all of those things are completely irrelevant to us as long as you're of African heritage or African background and you're in Australia at the time of your application, or at least activities being delivered from Australia or in Australia. And we're also looking for African community organizations. And with that, we mean we're looking for organizations that are really focused on stories and storytelling. Again, we're looking for a range of stories, but I do want to mention here, this is about creative media. It's not about fine art. And there is a distinct sort of difference there. What I do mean by that is, like I said, the focus is storytelling and narrative. The focus is not about art. So it's not about, huge canvases with oil paintings and things like that. That's not really what this grant is focused on. So as long as you meet those eligibility criteria, you have a current ABN, if you're an individual, you're of African background, and you're in Australia, and you sort of focused on creative media and you focused on storytelling and narrative. If you're an organization that is actually led by African Australian community members or an African Australian community organization, then we do encourage you to apply and consider submitting an application. On that point, how would you apply? So if you received an email from the Scanlon Foundation or from Ubuntu Project about the grant, there's a link in there on where to apply. Also, if you jump on our Instagram at Ubuntu Project AU, in our bio, there is also a link there. And lastly, on our website, ubp.org.au. So once you click on those links, it will take you to Smarty Grants. Smarty Grants is an online platform that you can do a lot of stuff with, but one of the main things they do is you apply for grants through them. So it's a digital platform. So when you click that link, it'll take you straight through our grant. It should say African Australian Creative Media Grants 2024. You will see something similar to this come up, where you have a couple of options, where you can either start a submission, you can preview the form, you can download the form to have a read of it, you can even print it. If you're part of a group or a collective or in a partnership applying, you probably will need to download or preview the form just so you can see what the questions are. Are there things you need to discuss with your colleagues and partners? Are there any attachments that you need to collect? Any documents you want to attach, for example. When you're ready to start your application, you click on Start a Submission. If you haven't used Smarty Grants and don't have a registered account, you can quickly do it. You just need an email and create a password. Now, you have to make your application has to be completed through the platform. All right, so you can't print it out and fill it in and so on. it does have to be done through the platform. The good thing with the platform is it will save things for you as you go through. You can start your application, save it, leave it, come back to it, and pick up from where you've ended. And also it will prompt you if you've missed a question or a section. If you've left it blank, it will prompt you. So it's really useful, really helpful. And also sort of the layout of the grant application is sort of similar to what we're doing here, where you'll start off by putting in your ABN, and it follows sort of a similar layout as this information session, as we go through, and you'll be asked questions, and then you go through the grant, and then you review, and then you submit it, and so on. Now, very, very important point is when you finish your application, you do need to make sure that you click submit at the end of it all. Applications do close at midnight on the 3rd of March. So when it hits midnight, 3rd of March, you will not be able to submit. The platform will lock out, and you won't be able to put in an application, even if you've already completed it, just not submitted it. So do make sure you submit it well before the deadline. By the way, if you do have any questions, do send them through. I can see Rachel's been kind of already responding to a couple of them from Rachel from Scanlon Foundation, so I appreciate that. And that's pretty much, it's not super complicated application. You don't need to, be an experienced grant writer or anything like that. It is deliberately being sort of put together in a way where even people that don't have a deep, long experience of completing grant applications, you should be able to manage it. Of course, we can't help you complete the application, but if you get stuck on something doesn't make sense, you're unsure about something, do send us through an email on creativegrants@ubp.org.au. But I'll have that up on the slides later on as well, the email. All right. So you know how to apply, you know where to apply. Key application sections. So this is, as I said, in the grant, it will take you through different sections. And I just want to go over this really quickly because, it's really important to have an understanding of what it is you're writing out. And sometimes we can get blinders when we're doing our grant applications. So I just want to spend a little bit of time going over some of the important sections I want you to be aware of. Really, really important. Describe what your organization does. If you're part of an organization, if you're an individual, maybe you've done some other creative work, you can put some things in there. It will be really, really helpful for the assessors and for us because it allows us to get a more complete picture of who you are. It will also inform us more in depth about what you want to do and so on. Kind of like I did at the beginning, I told you a little bit about Ubuntu Project. It just frames the rest of what's to follow, I guess. Doesn't have to be a super long, detailed description with everything you've ever done, obviously. But it could be short, could be a couple of sentences, a paragraph that you will be asked this question. So have a think about it. And just sort of, like I said, you won't be able to cover everything. And I'm sure you're proud of everything that you've done, but maybe just sort of the big picture, high level overview of what your organization does, or if you're an individual applying as an individual creative person, maybe some of the things you've worked on in the past. Also really important, provide a brief description of your project, including the aims and objectives. Not on this grant, on other grants, I've seen people do a complete application and at the end, you read it as an outside person that have no context of who this person applying is, and you realize, okay, I know they're shooting a video. Is it one video? How many videos is it? Is it an online series? Are they going to do a screening somewhere? So really, really importantly, do include a brief description of your actual project. What is it you're actually doing? And include the aims and objectives. So aims, obviously, what are you looking to achieve? Why are you kind of doing it? And the objectives is, well, if you were to do this, what do you hope that will lead to? Is it about starting certain conversations? Is it about increasing understanding around a topic or a theme or a community? Is it about sharing experiences? Whatever it might be, do make sure you sort of outline that, because that will add weight to what you're doing and why you're doing it as it's being assessed. Please tell us your planned activities. You might think, well, you already kind of said brief description of your project, but your planned activities are a little bit different. So if it's, are you shooting videos? How many videos? Are you interviewing people? Well, how long is that going to go for? Are you creating something? Are you writing something? Where is it going to be published? Are there different aspects of what you're doing? Is it like a sort of multi-series kind of thing? Is it a one-time thing that you're doing? Where is it going to be? Is it going to go on your website? Is it going to be shared openly? And so on. Just, it could be, like it says, doesn't have to be, again, an essay, but what are you actually doing? That would be really, really helpful for the assessors. And it just gives everybody that knows, again, might not be experts in your field or your creative field, but it'll help us to sort of understand a lot more around what you're planning to do and how it might work and so on. And please do tell us how the project will address the key criteria. I will speak about the key criteria in a second for both streams. And each one of them has 4 key criteria. Really, really important that you sort of speak to them and connect your project or your activity back to those key criteria. Because that is actually, the key criteria is actually what we assess the grants on, which I'll also speak about in a couple of slides. And what are your expected outcomes? Basically, what do you hope to achieve? What will be the follow-on effect? Again, kind of, I spoke to it a little bit, but what do you hope to achieve? What will it lead to? If you do your activity, what will come out of it? What will the community benefit, or those that watch it, or those that participate, and so on. Even if it's, bringing in a graphic designer to, we're going to spruce up our website. We're going to bring in a graphic designer. We're going to redesign our website. Okay, great. What is that going to lead to? Is it increased traffic? Is it more sponsors, or whatever it might be? Just, again, make sure you sort of outline that correctly, or clearly, I should say. In a project budget is really important. We're talking about money. We're talking about grants. I am going to speak a little bit about what a budget is and how it works in Smarty Grants. But make sure you include a budget on there, and any supporting materials. Now, those supporting materials could be quotes for any large budget items. Those supporting documents could be, if you're working in a partnership, you're collaborating with someone, you have different artists, maybe that's going to be part of your project, maybe getting a support letter from them saying, yep, if they're successful, we're going to do this together, confirming that. Maybe it's some things you've worked on in the past that you want to share, whether it's flyers or links, and things like that. Basically, any kind of materials, documents, photos, whatever it might be that you think will support your application, you're more than welcome to apply. And again, it gives the assessors a more complete sort of image or picture and understanding of what you're doing and how it's going to work, and so on and so forth. All right. 3 criteria. So as I said, there are 4 for platform development, and there's 4 for content creation for both Stream 1 and Stream 2. So Stream 1 is platform development. That's $10,000 to support the improvement and continuation of platforms, including websites, social media sites, or other. So whatever kind of platform you have, you can apply up to $10,000 for that. All right. Now, the way it works is there are 4 key criteria, and your application will be judged against those criteria. So really, really important you familiarize yourself with them. When I do a grant, I actually go in and I print out the criteria, even if it's 3, 4 of them, and I sometimes stick them up on a board. I have them on my desk, and every time I'm answering a question in the application or I'm giving any information, I'll ask myself, okay, how does this information or the response I'm giving here or the example I'm giving speak to the criteria? So the 4 criteria for platform development is relationship, the development of larger networks, additional collaborations or partnerships that may contribute to the platform. So if you have partnerships, collaborations, as I said, if you have other artistic, creative people working with you, other organizations maybe you're working with, that's something that's going to be looked on favorably. And it is one of the important points that we refer back to when assessing all applications. The second criteria is reach, how the funds are used to raise the profile of the platform and its content. If you remember, when I spoke about the purpose of the grant is to support the sector development and to increase reach and depth of engagement. So we look towards that, whether it's in how you're using the funds, what your budget says, is this going to increase your reach, your number of people, whether it's Australia or globally, that are interacting with your platform? It's something that we value, again, because it's one of the purposes of the actual grant. And then we have operational capacity. Basically, we look for evidence or indicators that you actually have the capacity to deliver the project. If you've never worked on a production, never shot a video, and you're like, I'm going to shoot a complete film. Well, do you have the ability to do that? Again, that's why it's important, as I said, to speak initially in your application to what your organization does or what kind of projects or activities, if you're applying as an individual, you've been linked with. And it comes back to operational capacity and the ability to actually deliver on what you've planned or your application project is. And the last for platform development is viability. Have you strategically thought about how you're going to scale your platform? Have you, really thought about the different components? Are you just, sort of planning to do one thing and that's going to change everything? Or have you actually gone through and strategized and said, okay, well, we're going to use X percent of the funding to, for paid advertising. We're going to use this for consultants, like a graphic designer, to come on board and help out with our branding, and whatever. So we look for, is there a strategy to upscaling and growing your platform? So those are the 4 key criteria. If you do have any questions on those or any others, like I said, do send them through. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to email us if it comes to you in the next couple of weeks before the applications close. All right, so now for key criteria for Stream 2, content creation. Stream 2, is also for $10,000 for the execution of original content and productions created by African Australians. Really, really important. We're looking for original productions or creations or projects, and they have to be obviously led by African Australians. And again, like I said earlier, wide range of what we're talking about. It could be visual, it could be graphic, it could be written, really sort of open-ended, and that's what the Stream 2 is for. The key criteria, and there is overlap between the key criteria for Stream 1 and Stream 2 with slight differences. So the first one for the key criteria here is capacity. So again, is it evidence that you will be able to deliver on the project? Will you be able to basically have experience doing this, even if you may be doing it at a much higher level now, but have you done this before? Is this something you will be able to actually do? Number 2 is voices. So description outlining how the project raises the profile of stories created by African Australians. Again, going back to the purpose of the grant. Going back to the purpose of the grant, one of those is stories and narratives and voices of African Australians being sort of elevated and raised up. So we look for that in the application as well. Third is originality, right? Is the content you're producing original? Is the material, the topics, the way you're doing it original? And we would appreciate a statement on what inspired this project. Excuse me. We would appreciate a statement on what inspired this project and its significance. Why do you want to do it? What does it mean to you? What do you want to achieve? Kind of when I talked about outcomes earlier. And number 3 is reach, just like with the previous stream. Evidence of promotional or marketing plan to reach project's desired audience. So this stream is not only about creating the content and that's it, but then also how are you getting it out there and how are you getting it, gonna get it, make sure that that voice that you now have created this content to elevate, how is that going to be heard across Australia or online or wherever it is you're doing it. All right, number 4, we'll go to budget. The good thing with Smarty Grants is it has a budget section. You put in your figures, so it will help you out with figuring out the totals. So you don't have to worry about clerical errors in that way. Many of you, if not all, probably already familiar with budgets, so I'll go over this really quickly. On Smarty Grants, when you get to the budget section, you list all of your expenditure or your expenses. We have some examples on there like website hosting, technical equipment, admin costs, printing or stationery or whatever you might need. Maybe you need to rent a venue for your shoot or your work or your meetings. Bring on board consultants like a graphic designer, for example. And what you would do is across from that, you would put total dollar figures up to not to exceed $10,000. And that's pretty much what the budget is. Now, really, really important point that I want to point out here. Value your own time. One thing I know a lot of us community members, we do a lot of stuff voluntarily, especially a lot of creative people want to put their resources as much as they can towards their content, but do value your time. You are allowed to pay yourself for your time. So if you're doing any kind of administration, management, if you're going to go out there taking photos, you're going to be spending time online promoting or, whatever you might be doing, do value your time, do put that in there, and don't feel like that's something that will be frowned upon if we see that on the budget, right? But other than that, if you do have specific questions about budgets and things like that, again, do feel free to send your questions through today, or you can also follow up with an email. But do go over the budget. It's really, really important. And one thing that's really important, I'm going to talk about it a bit more, but it's also that your budget reflects your activities. Your budget reflects what you're actually doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically that is to say, if you're producing a number of videos, there are certain things that you would expect to be in the budget, and then there might be things that we wouldn't expect to be in the budget. So just making sure your budget reflects your project activity and timelines and all of those other things. All right, so before you start your application, what is a successful project? What is a successful application? And there's 4 points here that I want to talk to really quickly. And they are that you address the selection criteria. So if you're in stream 1 or stream 2, like I said, do refer back to your 4 selection criteria, and make sure that you do speak back to them, or you connect your responses back to them. Be clear and concise. There's no need to write 500 words if you can get the information across in 100 or 2. And one really important point here is we have a lot of very creative people that are going to be doing submissions. You might be working on a wide range of different projects. So if you are using language, try to make it simple. You might be a filmmaker, you might be a photographer, and maybe those of us assessing it are not. So if you're using technical language, try to simplify it, or provide a context, right? So you kind of say, oh, we're doing whatever it might be, which means we're shooting 3 or 4 videos, or, whatever it might be. So just make sure that if the person reading what you've written doesn't know much about you, doesn't know much about your field, that they'll still be able to understand what it is you want to do. And a tip for that is when you've written up your application, what I do personally is I get somebody else to read it and say, it doesn't make sense. Or I will write up the application, leave it for a few days, come back and read it again with fresh eyes. And just imagine that the person reading this doesn't know you, doesn't know much about your creative field, and kind of, simplify the language basically for that. Show evidence where you can. That's point number 3 for a successful application or project. Again, showing evidence is, like I said, the attachments, the documents that you attach, if it's support letters, if it's quotes for not everything, but really large expenditure lines or something that's big costs. If you have any collaborations, partnerships, anyone that you're working with, include that in there. So the more evidence you can attach, the more evidence you can provide, the stronger your application will be, of course. And write specifically for this grant round. So this grant round is the activities are to be delivered between May 2024 and May 2025. So make sure what you're doing is between that period, that you speak to that, that if you've filmed stuff before, if you're editing it and stuff like that, absolutely. But it has to be activities that are happening within that window. So you can't apply for something you've already done. You can't apply for something you're doing in late 2025 or 2026. It's for things that are between May of 2024 and 25. So those are just 4 big tips around how to complete a successful application. Now, you've heard me speak a number of times about selection process, a selection panel, and things like that. So I want to just quickly touch on who's going to be on our panel and a little bit what the process works at. So we've got 4 amazing African Australian creatives from different fields from across Australia. We've got Azza Ismail, Khalid Farah, Aisha Tufa, and Huna Amwera. I do want to mention that they're volunteering their time. They're amazing creatives. Some of you may already be familiar with them. If you're not, I'm sure you can find them on social media, on the net. They have a lot of amazing stuff that they publish and they put out, and some of them run their own platforms. And like I said, they are volunteering their time just because they think this is really important. They want to see, African Australian creatives being supported to pursue what they want to do and so on. So I do want to thank all of them for already agreeing to be a part of this and the work that they're going to be doing. A very quick overview of how the process works. So applications are open until the deadline. And then what happens is the applications will be shortlisted. So we will basically take those applications and we'll make sure that they've got an ABN, that their applicants or the organizations applying are led by African Australian community members, that they meet some of those other criteria that are outlined earlier. And then we'll sort of shortlist them. And then the assessment panel will look at those applications, and they will then score and judge those applications up against the relevant key selection criteria. So there's 2 weeks after applications close, there's 2 weeks for shortlisting, a further 2 weeks for the assessment panel to do their part, and then final decisions will be made. And like I said earlier, there'll be 10 in total, 5 per stream applicants that will be hopefully funded. So all applicants will be informed of the outcomes via email before 22nd of April, 2024. Now, we do hope to actually get everything back and respond to everybody with the outcomes prior to the 22nd of April. If you haven't heard following the 22nd of April, do email us, do get in touch, because there might be an oversight or some sort of an error. But definitely by the 22nd, everybody will receive an email, I believe, sort of advising them of the outcomes. And if you're successful, all activities are expected to commence no later than the 1st of May. That's not to say you need to deliver your activity in total, but start, whether it's just starting your meetings, getting things together, booking, doing whatever it is you're doing. And that's just to say, don't kind of leave it off thinking, oh, I've got 12 months. As we all know, 12 months runs out really quickly. So that is our selection panel. That's how the process works. Now you can find some of the information we had on here today by going to our website at ubp.org.au, and you'll find the grant guidelines attached there. And there's also a link to the grant guidelines on our Instagram at Ubuntu Project AU. Obviously, the link for that is in our bio. So you can read over all of those things. I'll just quickly review if I've got any questions. I saw that there was a couple that came in, but I think they've all been responded to. We haven't got any questions on there. If you want to stick around and ask any questions, anything like that, do feel free to do that. Like I said, if any questions come to you, I know it happens to me. It's quite a bit of information I've gone through today over the last 45 minutes. But if anything comes to you tomorrow, next week, in the next couple of weeks, do feel free to get in touch with us. And you can do that through our email, so creativogrants@ubp.org.au, and also Instagram. So if you want to sort of send through any information, any questions, or if there's anything you want to know. Now, if it's a longer, more complicated question, probably email works a lot better. But if it's just a quick check-in, that should be all. So I've been Noshanino. Thank you very much for joining us. Really, really important date to remember is all applications, as I said, close at midnight on the 3rd of March. If you haven't submitted your application by then, you will not be able to submit it after that deadline. So do make sure you do it. Now, we do have a recording of this information session. So if I was going a little bit too quick for you, or if there's others that maybe couldn't make it tonight, do check. We'll post something about that on our Instagram in the coming days. So thank you all. Thank you for your time. really looking forward to seeing your applications and hearing about all the great projects and creative pursuits and stories that you all want to share. And best of luck to you all. And looking forward to seeing your applications. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.